Sabine scanned the broken archways and the immediate vicinity. The air was still. It was unsettling. She tracked a small draft coming from a small fissure just beside the archways.
Tristan, can we get these doors open?
Doesn't look like there's power.
Tristan studied the bay door console and moved towards the fissure.
It looks like something small crawled through here.
Where is everyone?
Sabine looked around confused.
It's as if everyone just up and disappeared. Foreman Claypore isn't one to slack.
This is indeed odd.
Tristan followed a small crack originating from the fissure to a larger rupture in the cliff face.
Look, sister.
Sabine walked over to Tristan and knelt to examine the rupture, running her fingers across its coarse and scorched edges.
This isn't natural. It was made by a plasma torch.
Does it go down any further?
Tristan stayed put, studying the rupture. Sabine took out a small peg and tossed it down. She activated a light within the peg as it illuminated a deeper recess within. All the evidence contradicted everything Sabine had inferred about the earthly wound. As she observed the peg travel further down the recess.
Okay, that's weird.
Sabine turned to Tristan.
This isn't an entry.
What is it?
Judging from the gaping perimeter, it looks like the rupture is the result of a large energy spike caused from within.
It looks like we'll have to get these doors open if we're going to understand any of this.
Tristan, get my arc pulse torch.
Sabine points towards the ship.
On it.
Tristan rummaged through all of the equipment that Sabine regularly kept with her on her Fang-class starfighter she appropriately named 6. He shoved aside all her art supplies, which she kept within close reach whenever she felt the urge to tag something that came to her in the moment. He grabbed the arc pulse torch finally and headed off. Poe soared down a corridor in haste. It was an unusually busy day for him. He sidestepped and evaded foot traffic through the halls, buckling belts, clipping pins, and tidying his uniform. The last time his stride had so much urgency, he was at war. Only this time, his war was with bureaucracy and the political workings of the new galactic democracy. Finn's voice trilled through his communicator.
Poe, can you hear me?
Finn buzzed through. While still in mid-stride, Poe opened his comms.
Yeah, bud. I'm in a hurry,
Poe said, while panting heavily.
Are you jogging?
Nope. The Congress is gathering today. It's a pretty important vote.
Perfect.
Don't perfect me. I'm in a hurry. Can this wait?
No, it's an emergency.
Finn sternly relayed over comms. Poe stopped short and raised his comms closer to his face.
Emergency? What's going on?
Poe adjusted his suit and he continued to tuck loose cloth from his shirt into his pants.
Rey and I got a lead from Master Obi-Wan Kenobi.
General Kenobi? Of the Clone Wars?
Poe gasped.
Isn't he... Never mind. What's the message?
We're on our way to Concordia and could really use some backup. Something there is causing a huge disruption in the Force.
Finn relayed.
I wish I could help, bud, but the Congress is here today to vote on the next planetary assembly. It's the last year Brental hosts the Democratic Congress. Also, matters on all things the Force is strictly a Skywalker order thing, isn't it?
That sentence couldn't have been more alien to Poe. All he had known was war. His parents served the Rebel Alliance, and he had served the Resistance. As general, he now had the unforgiving task of political meandering. The galaxy fell into bitter chaos after the home of the New Republic Hosnian Prime fell to Starkiller Base. Large power vacuums left many systems and planets in disarray, with their populace's most powerful and influential fighting over the void left by not only the New Republic, but the First Order, if that planet hadn't been annexed already. Following the victory on Exegol, the leaders of the Resistance had established a rotating Senate in which multiple systems and planets would host the Democratic capital every 4 cycles. Each individual system and planet that had signed the Galactic Democracy Accords were bestowed equal voting powers across the board. Even backwater planets like Raeda and Jellican had relatively equal representation in the Senate and Congress. The system was imperfect still, but many planets thrived on individual merit and trade. Crime was crime about it. That had never changed, no matter who ruled or governed the galaxy.
Can't that wait?
Finn interrupted.
Well, you know it's a big deal, this rotating capital business. And things would be a lot smoother if my supposed co-general didn't run off to be a Jedi.
I had to do it, Poe. I couldn't ignore this.
Look, I understand. I'm just tied up in bureaucratic red tape. Have you got a solid lead on anything?
No, but I guess we're on our own.
Finn sighed.
Buddy, get some solid intel and I'm sure I can push the Congress to send some support.
We'll try.
Hey, Poe.
Rey shouted from the background.
Hey, Rey. Hey, I gotta go. I'm already late.
Poe dashed off and turned off his comm. At the end of the corridor, Poe found Rose waiting for him with a stack of papers and binders filled to the brim.
Captain Tico.
General, I've prepared all the briefing materials for you.
Rose handed Poe the briefings and began tidying his suit, brushing rogue dust particles away from what clearly was clothing that had not seen much use.
Good work. Sorry I'm late.
Poe said, still breathing heavily from the sprint.
All good. Was that Finn?
Yeah, just some Jedi business.
Don't you mean Skywalker business?
Yeah, that's right. I keep getting them mixed up. No more Jedi, only Skywalkers.
Poe tightened up his suit and buttoned up his top button.
How do I look?
Neat.
Rose commented slyly.
Oh, God.
Poe tugged at his suit jacket and walked into the chambers. The buzzing and crackling of Sabine's arc pulse torch rumbled as she finished cutting away at the locking mechanism on the bay doors. The scorched metal hissed as the locking pistons tumbled and toppled over, allowing Sabine and Tristan access to the facility.
Help me out, Tristan.
Sabine grabbed onto one half of the door. Tristan latched onto the other door as they began to pull the bay doors apart. As the doors opened, more stillness pervaded the air. Nobody around. No sounds. A mining facility that was usually bustling with activity had been emptied, devoid of life or activity. Sabine and Tristan both looked at each other in confusion. Sabine knew that something strange had transpired. Every time she had visited the facility in the past, there was a purpose. She was either there to receive production and inventory reports or to check on the working conditions of those employed to mine the Beskar ore. This was the first time she had come to the facility where she could hear her own thoughts ricochet off the craggy and jagged rock interior, going out one ear and arriving back in the other.
Tristan, head down to the security sector and see if you can find out what happened here.
Sabine ordered.
I'm going to check out the source of the rupture.
Got it. Be careful, Sabine.
Sabine nodded and traveled down the various corridors of the mine and studied every nook and cranny, revealing more emptiness. After Clan Wren established Concordia as the preeminent mining facility for Mandalore's Beskar production, this mine had been prosperous. It was now an empty husk. Beskar ingots, ore, and armor plates lay scattered haphazardly across the floor with no rhyme or purpose. It was as if they dropped randomly. Sabine had visited this mine several times, but it had never looked like this. She knew that something inexplicable had to have happened for the natural order and organization of this facility to fall so abruptly into disarray. Just as Sabine had reached the origin point of the energy blast that had caused the rupture, Tristan's voice trilled through the comms.
Sabine?
Go.
Sabine answered, still studying the room.
Want the good news or the bad news?
Always the bad news last, Tristan.
Well, everything here seems to be in order. Holograms are all operational, but
Tristan hesitated.
there's nothing on them.
Are you sure?
Sabine spoke into the comms directly, as if to emphasize her confusion.
Yes, I'm scrubbing the footage. The last time there was any activity in the mine was 2 weeks ago, and then nothing. The next day, the footage is empty.
This was unsettling news for Sabine. How could things have just suddenly stopped? What could have happened that caused the vanishing of nearly 200 Mandalorians in the blink of an eye? Sabine continued to scan the area for any abnormalities until suddenly, her scanner chirped at a small crack in the wall.
Tristan,
What is it?
I need you to call Bo-Katan.
What is it, sister?
Do it.
All right.
Sabine continued to study the scans as Tristan hurried off to the ship. Every possible angle she would approach the situation from turned up empty. Sundries left scattered haphazardly throughout the facility. All the evidence Sabine had pointed to a simple, yet complicated and even more so unbelievable vanishing act. But the outlier remained at the forefront of her mind. The gaping entry wound. Or rather, after further examination, exit wound. She had a high degree of certainty that no one had come in and caused anything. It would have been impossible for something like this to happen without. The wound in the earth itself was evidence enough that what she was looking for was within.
What is it?
Bo-Katan trilled through the comms.
Sabine needs you on Concordia immediately.
Tristan scratched his head.
She didn't say why, but she sounded spooked.
Bo-Katan sighed.
That's never a good thing. I'm on my way.
After the congregation had finished its deliberations, Poe exited the chambers and approached a Moncala representative.
Congressman Aftab.
Aftab turned,
Poe, it's good to see you participating in these delegations.
patting Poe on the shoulders.
Yeah, great. Listen.
Poe was interrupted.
Can you believe that after all these years, the capital will once again return to Coruscant?
Yeah. Hey, Aftab.
Poe interjected.
What is it, Poe?
I got word from General Finn. I mean Finn.
Go on. Aftab listened intently.
He says that there's a storm brewing over in Mandalorian space. I was wondering if I could lead a small fleet to support them.
Poe, you know that we can't do that. Miss Skywalker was adamant that the new Skywalker Order would be an independent entity. This Congress respected her wishes. It would be hard for us to justify any resources spent in aiding her or Finn.
I realize that, sir, but they're our friends. What if they need help?
Oh, I get it. But everyone agreed on Agent Kloss that day that upon the forming of the galactic democracy and Miss Skywalker's new order, that we would mutually recognize each other's autonomy and independence. We would not interfere with Octo, and we would not rely on the Order as we did the Jedi Order in the past.
Poe understood completely. Rey had been unmoving that the new Skywalker Order would not be involved in politics, nor would it play for any sides in a new government. The populace and centrists alike both reached out for a newly established Jedi police force, as they described it, during the early stages of drafting the new democratic constitution. Poe had to come to terms with this new reality. Aftab pat Poe on the shoulder.
I'm sorry.
This had been the first time the galaxy had an inkling of a threat. Although the details were sparse, Poe knew that a missive from the great General Kenobi, especially from the Nether, was not a warning they should ignore. But Aftab was right. As much as he wanted to help his friends, there was one thing he learned from Leia. He had to be a general. Rey had made it clear that the Skywalker Order would be galactic peacekeepers under no authority, and in so declaring, she cut herself off from any help from the democracy. Sabine studied the organic matter that she had found. It had her perplexed. She was great with machinery and engineering, but she knew that organic material of this complexity should not exist. Bo-Katan entered the security room where Sabine was studying her scans. She walked directly behind Sabine and examined her work.
Good, you're here.
Sabine acknowledged.
Ren, what was so important that I had to personally visit Concordia?
Have you seen the place?
Sabine replied, gesturing around the room. Bo-Katan looked around at a disheveled and empty facility. At first glance, nothing seemed off. Of course now, having seen only Sabine since entering the facility, Bo-Katan realized the situation warranted a bit of caution.
Wait,
Yep.
where is everyone?
Bo-Katan approached the overlook and leaned up against the railing to see a lifeless cave. Sabine sourced footage from the holograms.
2 weeks ago, normal. Then nothing. Everyone disappeared. Nothing on the holograms.
Bo-Katan scratched her chin.
This is disturbing.
Look at this.
Sabine showed Bo-Katan her findings.
What does this look like?
Crude flesh at best. No longer viable, I'm assuming.
That's just it.
Sabine picked up a tablet and swiped through data.
It is viable. My scanner dates this organic matter 4,000 to 5,000 years old.
Bo-Katan stared at the tablet screen, perplexed.
Sabine, you know I don't...
I'll make it simple. This is a biological impossibility.
Sabine exclaimed.
So what does this mean?
Bo-Katan asked.
I have no clue,
Sabine responded hesitantly.
but I'm going to find out.
I'm guessing you'll have to take it back to Mandalore to have it examined?
Yes, this facility isn't equipped for something like this. I'm going to have Tristan investigate further.
Sabine is interrupted. The cave begins to tremor violently, moving around the machinery in the room. Sabine and Bo-Katan brace themselves as the entire facility's foundations begin to crumble.
Perfect.
Sabine sarcastically remarked.
Let's move.
Sabine and Bo-Katan escape swiftly. They negotiate their way through the tunnels, navigating around falling debris, arriving at the bay door entrance where Tristan was waiting. But something was strange. Tristan was staring out at something.
Tristan, you okay? What's going on?
Sabine walked up behind Tristan, panting heavily.
Tristan?
Bo-Katan walked up beside Sabine.
Ren, look.
A mysterious cloaked figure stood before them, backlit by a distant setting star. It stood there solemnly with its hands outstretched. The tremor seized to a calm. The hooded figure's head panned up to look at them.
Who are you?
Bo-Katan commanded in answer.
Was that you just now?
Sabine added. The mysterious hooded figure shook his head as if to express discontent and disappointment. Bo-Katan stepped forward, drawing the darksaber.
Identify yourself.
Suddenly, the hooded figure's eyes opened. With most of their face obscured by shadow, a sharp yellow glint shimmered. They spoke.
That belongs to me.
A thunderous voice reverberated in their ears, causing Bo-Katan, Sabine, and Tristan to recoil. They had never felt such pressure from one single being before. Bo-Katan remained steadfast,
I said,
pointing the darksaber at the figure.
identify yourself.
The hooded figure suddenly appeared in front of Bo-Katan. Bo-Katan tried her best to defend herself, but the movements of the figure were too quick. The figure unleashed a devastating punch into Bo-Katan's abdomen, disarming her. The figure took up the darksaber and admired it. Sabine rallied to Bo-Katan, but the hooded figure spun around swiftly, kicking Sabine into Tristan, sending them several yards away, crashing into mining equipment.
This is not Mandalore,
the figure proclaimed. Sabine grabbed her chest. It was as if a rail crawler had run her over. She hadn't felt this pain in a long time. Bo-Katan lay on the ground beneath the figure as she gasped for any spare breaths. She struggled to grab hold of earth as she forced herself onto all fours and looked up at the cloaked figure. The figure turned slowly towards Sabine.
This saber once called to you.
Sabine mustered enough strength to respond.
How could you possibly?
The figure walked slowly towards Sabine.
It was wrong to do so.
Bo-Katan struggled to her feet and drew her blaster.
That darksaber belongs to Mandalore.
She opened fire only to have the plasma sheaths repelled by the figure in the same way it had in the past when she fired upon Maul. The plasma had veered and curved away from the figure as if they too were also employing the power of the Force. The figure then shot his hand in Bo-Katan's direction, pushing her into the air several yards as her head clanged onto the metal rampart. The figure approached Sabine. The sharp glow of their yellow eyes met hers, rendering her paralyzed. The pressure of this person's energy clasped her every limb and immobilized her. It was as if 100 hands were gripping her body and holding her still, each hand sending electrical currents through them. The pain was excruciating.
What is this?
Sabine writhed in pain. The figure raised the darksaber in the air, ready to strike the final blow. The next moment lasted for an eternity in Sabine's head. She could not move. All she could do was wait for the slow embrace of finality. Memories flashed before her eyes. All her years serving aboard the Ghost, laughing with Kanan, Hera, Seb, Ezra, and Chopper, all played in slow motion in her mind. Raising the darksaber, and once again uniting the warrior clans of Mandalore, all the most profound and catalytic events in her life replayed in her thoughts. The blade lowered slowly, aimed directly at her head. This was the menace that had been causing this uncertain feeling across Mandalore, and she didn't know why. All she could do was track the blade further and further as it approached her. She closed her eyes. The darksaber's stroke fell, only to clash with another, causing the figure to recoil slightly. Sabine opened her eyes. The figure had retreated 2 steps. Time had returned to normal. She glanced back to see a lightsaber spitting off into the distance. Her eyes widened as she saw who caught the lightsaber. Rey readied into an offensive stance.
Finn!
I got it! Finn rushed to Sabine's side. Rey engaged the hooded figure. The clash of their sabers resounded across the moon. They both exchanged a few parries and strokes until the figure retreated a few steps back. Rey stood her ground.
Who are you?
The figure looked down at their saber and back at Rey.
You have some training.
Rey was baffled at this statement but remained on guard. Finn had moved Sabine and Tristan out of harm's way at the foot of the Falcon's entrance and ran towards Rey's side, igniting his lightsaber.
Who are they? Sith?
Finn asked. Rey focused on the figure.
I don't think so. His form is familiar.
What's our move?
Do you remember Anakin's Form 5?
Rey asked while the figure stood ominously admiring them.
Barely.
I'm going to engage him in Form 3.
Rey pivoted her stance, placing her weight on her right leg, aligning her saber across her forehead with her left hand stretched out with 2 fingers as if to extend the lightsaber's aim.
Back me up. Whichever form you've trained the most.
I'm with you.
Finn acknowledged her.
Are you done strategizing, young one?
The figure taunted. Rey lunged at the figure and engaged in a flurry of strokes. Each slash met with resistance from the figure. Finn tried to find his footing and his opportunities to add more strikes to the offense. He recalled fighting Kylo Ren on Starkiller Base and the intense atmosphere back then. The figure held their own, parrying every single strike coming from Rey and Finn. With ease, in fact. Rey spun around and slashed at the figure's heel, while Finn struck at the figure's head. The figure clashed with Rey's saber as Finn's saber stopped. Rey was taken aback.
Fall back!
Rey pushed Finn back with the Force, flipping backwards to land beside him. Finn rejoined her.
Rey, he
used the Force, I know.
The figure stood up and continued to stare them down. Finn could see Rey's hands visibly shaking.
Finn, this person is trained. Well trained. I didn't feel it until now when he deflected your saber.
Rey recoiled.
What do we do?
Teamwork. The Force is our ally.
We are one with the Force.
Finn recited.
The Force is with us.
Rey continued. Rey and Finn engaged again, this time flinging rocks at the figure. The figure balked at their attempt at creating an opening. Strike after strike, the figure parried with relative ease. Rey switched to Anakin's Form 5 overhead strike, while Finn lunged with a forward stab. The figure parried Finn's strike and redirected Finn's saber to parry Rey's overhead strike, spinning and landing a vicious kick on Finn. Rey adjusted herself and came in for another strike. The figure stopped her saber again with his bare hands. Rey pushed through with all her might, but there was no prevailing in sight. Her blade had been completely absorbed by the figure's hand. Try as she might, the figure showed no signs of weakening or tiring. The figure did nothing but laugh. He brushed her lightsaber to the side as Rey spun around and unleashed a force push, to which the figure met with his own. The two struggled in a forced tug of war until, in an act of bravado, the figure smiled and force pushed Rey into Finn and slashed her lightsaber hilt in half. Rey landed on Finn as they both reclaimed their footing. Rey was bested. The only lightsaber they had was Finn's. The figure finally deactivated the lightsaber and stood up straight.
You have a long way to go before you can call yourself a warrior, young one.
The hood was blown off by the wind as the figure's cloak flowed with the throws, revealing an ancient Mandalorian helmet. Bo-Katan sat up in utter disbelief.
It can't be.
The figure turned towards Bo-Katan.
It is. And I am here to reclaim the title of Mandalore.
A smoke grenade landed around the figure's feet, obscuring their vision of the surrounding area. The figure held up their hands in protest and waved away the cloudy mist. Using his jetpack, Sun Rao had collected Bo-Katan, dropping her off at the Falcon.
Let's move!
Sun Rao shouted. Rey force-pulled her lightsaber pieces back to her and looked in dismay. She looked back at the figure, whose silhouette was the only shape she could make out amongst the fog.
Rey!
Finn grabbed her and retreated to the Falcon. As the Falcon took off, the figure stood there, staring at their pitiful retreat. Sabine, Tristan, and Bo-Katan took a rest in the common area of the Falcon, defeated, dejected, and trying to gather themselves. They were all gravely injured for just one person. Rey and Finn were disheartened at their defeat. They had prepared for so long to be the peacekeepers the galaxy needed, and at that moment, it wasn't enough. To top it off, she had lost her lightsaber. This had been the first time since her duel with Ben on the Death Star that someone had truly overwhelmed her. Beyond the surface, it was the way she was overwhelmed. This person used the Force, and in such a way she had been familiar with. That was nearly impossible given her access to very ancient knowledge within the Jedi texts. But of course, even they had their limits. The vibrations she sensed from this person felt seasoned, aged, ancient as well. Could their knowledge and training have even predated the Jedi texts themselves? She sat in a small cubby next to the gunnery, contemplating to herself. She reached out with her feelings. She received no response from the Force. Just like on Ahch-To, the voices were silent.
Ben, can you hear me?
Rey shed a single tear as she stared down on her cleaved lightsaber hilt.
It can't be.
Bo-Katan continued to murmur to herself.
What are you saying?
Sabine interrupted.
That man.
Bo-Katan continued to tremble. Finn walked up to Bo-Katan.
Who was that? He was trained, strong with the Force, knew our moves.
Bo-Katan avoided eye contact with everyone huddled around her. She began pacing, trying to put the pieces together, pieces that fit ever so snugly together in her mind. Both Sabine and Finn continued to nag her, but she fiddled and maneuvered around them both. The last piece of the puzzle was in place. It fit neatly into Bo-Katan's conclusions, and yet still she hesitated to place it. She shuddered at the thoughts that were so suddenly intruding on her mind right then and there. She halted. Bo-Katan's expression shifted from paranoia to sheer terror as her eyes met with Sabine's.
Tar Vizsla.